Hello guys, my name is Dr. Harman and I am one of the instructor over Dental101. So today I'm going to show you how to assess your composite restoration according to the criteria provided by ADC. So here we have the practical handbook of that is provided by ADC. So you can see in that there are rubrics for resin composite restoration. So according to this, I will show you how you can self-assess your work at home. So here I have composite restoration class 4 done on the mesial incisal side of the cavity of 111. So here this is the class 4 restoration. So you can see. So now I will do the assessment of this restoration according to ADC criteria. So according to ADC criteria, our first rubric is polishing. So how we can assess the polishing? So according to these rubrics, so if it is highly polished, then it will be a very good, but if there are some minor polishing is required, then it will be a satisfactory. Means if there is bit of roughness you can see, but that can be polished. But otherwise, if there is any general roughness all over the restoration, then it will consider into the borderline. But if there is excessive roughness that cannot be polished without compromising anatomy, then it will go into unsatisfactory. All right. So on this restoration, you can see that the restoration from the buccal side is highly polished. I can't see any roughness on the buccal surface. So now I will show you the palatal surface of this restoration. So on palatal surface of this restoration is also highly polished. So there is no roughness even on at the one point as well. So it's highly polished, and the incisal surface of this restoration is also polished. Only this area where I feel is a ditch. So the on the incisal surface of this restoration, there I feel a slight rough area that need a polishing. Okay, so for that it will be considered into satisfactory, where a minor polishing is required. All right. So with the first rubric, first point goes into the satisfactory. So like you can say 3, 2, 1, and 0. So in this part I will get 2 marks out of 3. So now I move to my second point, which is material handling. So in this I will look for if there is any internal porosity or any cleft on my restoration. So for that, the first for very good, there should be no internal porosities or any cleft on your restoration. All right. So then now I will look if on my restoration, if I can't see any porosity or any cleft on the buccal surface, so which for the buccal surface everything is fine. Now internal porosities and cleft. So on the buccal surface I can't see any porosity or any cleft on my restoration. Okay, so now I move towards the palatal surface of my restoration. So on the palatal surface also, it's all smooth and all smooth, so I can't see any porosity or any cleft on the palatal surface. Now again I move on my incisal surface. So on the incisal surface, again the same point, there is a porosity I can see that, so which is also need a polishing so that again the same thing. So because of that same porosity, we first our mark was deducted in first point, and again the second, according to second point, again our mark will deducted just because of the same mistake. So now again for the second point, material handling, I got like 1 porosity on my restoration. So according to the rubrics, so if there is no internal porosity or cleft, then it will be very good. But on my restoration there is 1 porosity. So according to that, minor internal porosity or cleft that do not affect aesthetics or durability will come under satisfactory. And my porosity is on the incisal surface, so it doesn't affect the static or the durability of the restoration. So according to the rubric, so it comes under satisfactory criteria. All right. So and if it is for borderline, if that same porosity will come if the same porosity was on the buccal surface, then it affect the aesthetic of the restoration. In that case, it can come under the borderline. All right. So if there is any porosity or cleft that present on the aesthetic surface in the undercom that affect the aesthetic or durability, that comes under borderline. And if there is excessive porosities or clefts, then it which require the replacement of the restoration, then it will come under unsatisfactory. So now I move to the other next point, which is material handling again, but for the increment lines. So for that, if there are no increment lines, then it is a very good. But if there are minor increment lines that do not affect the aesthetic or the durability, means if there is any minor increment lines which are very fine or then on the palatal or on the incisal surface, then still it will be a satisfactory. But the same incremental line if are present on the buccal surface, which is the aesthetic zone, then it will come under the borderline. And if there are excessive increment lines then which require replacement of the restoration, then it will come under the unsatisfactory rubrics. And also it will include the uncured resin present or any excessive unfilled resin applied. So it's like, so for that I will look for the increment lines. So I can't see any increment line on my buccal restoration, but here I can see that little bit of the resin is applied on the tooth structure. So if you can see, if you can zoom little bit, so it's very thin, thin lining of the composite on the tooth surface, so which shows there like the increments of, so and also because it is on the buccal surface, so it will affect the aesthetic of the restoration. So this just because of this thing, so it will come under the borderline. So this rubrics for material handling for increment lines, my restoration comes under the borderline. So there is only just one increment line. All right. Otherwise, it doesn't affect the durability of the restoration. But there is no increment line on the incisal surface as well as on the palatal surface. So for this rubric, my restoration comes under the borderline, right? And now I will move to the next point, which is restoration integrity. For this, there are only 2 points. Either if your restoration is present and intact, then it will come into very good. If it is fractured or loose or missing, then it will come under unsatisfactory. So my restoration is intact and present, so it comes under very good restoration, very good rubric. Now the next rubric, which is tooth or restoration junction. And for that, if there is no detectable, if your restoration and tooth junctions are not detectable by probe, it will, is good, very good. If they are just detectable by probe, it comes under satisfactory. And if there is deficiency or void at one or more point which is less than 0.5 mm wide, it comes under borderline. So if there is any cleft or any void that or any deficiencies which is less than 0.5 mm, it comes under borderline. But if it is more than 0.5 mm, then it comes under unsatisfactory. So for my restoration, I will check the junction. So here I feel a catch on my restoration. That is because of that unfilled resin on the tooth structure. And on the palatal side, I don't feel any catch. There is no detectable junction. And on the incisal side, again, there is no detectable junction. So because it's just a detectable with the probe, so it will come under a satisfactory, right? If there was a deficiency or void which can be measured with the probe, which which will be less than 0.5, then it come under borderline, and if it is more than 0.5, then it come under unsatisfactory. Okay, so now we move to next point, which is cervical overhangs. So to check cervical overhangs, we will use floss, okay, and we will check it with the floss. So we will move our floss along with the tooth structure, and if we with the floss we feel any catch, then means there are cervical overhangs are present. Okay, and if it's move smoothly along the tooth structure from toward restoration, then means there is no overhang, then it will come under very good. So in my restoration, if I show you like how I check my cervical overhang, so this is put my floss, and now I moved along my the tooth structure, and my floss is moving very smoothly over the tooth structure toward the restoration and comes. So it means that there is no cervical overhang present on my restoration over here at the junction of the tooth and restoration. So I can't feel any cervical overhang with the floss. It means there is no cervical overhang present, means it is very good. But if you feel any just slight catch with the floss, then it will come under the satisfactory. And if the excess composite at cervical margin, which is less than 0.5 mm, if there is like excess composite over here, and you can measure it with the probe, and it will be less than 0.5, then it will come under borderline. But if it is more than 0.5 mm, means there is too much composite or at this area, then it will come under unsatisfactory. So according to this rubric, my restoration comes under very good criteria. Okay, and now I move to the next point, which is excess material. For that, it means like if you left any debris of like any excess material, any composite on the tooth structure, which after like the examiner feel, or either on the tooth structure or on your restoration or in the under the gum area, so that can also cut your marks. So always try to clean the tooth, and if there is any excessive composite from the tooth structure, so that so you can save these marks. Okay, so for that, according to this criteria, if there is no loose excess material present, it is very good. And if there is any superficial excess material remaining on the tooth or on, then it come or on your restoration, then it come under satisfactory. And if there is small amount of excess material left subgingivally, means under the gums, then it come under borderline. And if there is excessive material left subgingivally, then it comes under unsatisfactory. So always check for any excess material after finishing your task. So according to this rubrics, my restoration comes under very good. Now next point is damage to adjacent or assessment tooth. So in this task, it's very rare that we can damage the adjacent tooth or assessment tooth, but still be careful while doing this task. So for this, if there is no damage to adjacent tooth or assessment tooth, means it comes under very good. And if there is any minor damage to adjacent tooth or assessment tooth not requiring further adjustment, then it comes under satisfactory. And if there is moderate correctable damage to the adjacent or the assessment tooth, it comes under borderline. And if there is major tooth damage, it comes under unsatisfactory. So as I told you, like there is very less chance that we can damage the tooth in this task, because this is a restoration task. But still we have to be careful while putting, if you are using, especially on the back teeth, if you're using your Tafelmeyer band or matrix band, in that case there is a chance that you might damage your gum or tooth, so you might lose your marks. So be careful while adapting your Tafelmeyer or bands around the tooth, or even while doing finishing. Yes, there is a chance that while doing the finishing, especially in the proximal area, you can if you are not careful with your soft flex disc, then in that case you can damage your adjacent tooth or the your assessment tooth. Yes, so while doing finishing with your soft flex disc, be very careful. For composite, I don't prefer the red one soft flex, especially because they are too coarse, so that there is a chance that can damage your tooth structure. So try to use start from the orange disc, and always be careful while finishing your surfaces of the restoration. Don't touch your disc to the tooth structure or adjacent tooth or even the gums. So in this tooth, while there is I can't see like if there is any damage done to the tooth's structure, so might be the little one on, but it doesn't, because I can't see any damage, so it can come under very good, or maybe minor. If there is any minor damage, then it comes under satisfactory. Alright, so be careful while doing the finishing of your composite, okay, and don't use any burr or so. Always try to pack your composite like that, so you need less finishing and polishing in the end. Alright, and then move to damage to gum. Again, it's the same. So while doing your while adapting your bands or while doing finishing, polishing, be careful, do not damage your gums. Okay, so in this case I can't see any damage to the gum. Okay, so it means it comes under very good or satisfactory. If there are any minor scratches, then it comes under satisfactory. But if there are major cuts, minor cuts, then it comes under a borderline. But if there is any major damage to the adjacent gum, then it will come under unsatisfactory. Then we move to the next point, which is proximal contact tightness. So for that, we'll check our contact area. If there is optimal contact tightness, it will be very good. If there is slightly light or slightly tight proximal contact, it is satisfactory. If there's very light or very tight contact, means borderline. And if the proximal contacts are absent or unable to pass floss through the contact, then it will come under unsatisfactory. So to check the for proximal contact, I will use the floss. So I will pass my floss, so you can see like there is optimal contact that we need. So not too tight, not too light, right? So it comes under very good. So you can use the floss to check your contacts, right? And if your floss is not passing, means it's too tight contact, or if it passes very with the difficulty, again it's tight, right? And if it's very easily passed through the contact area, means they are light contacts. And if the contacts are open, that you can see, right? So now we move to the next rubric, proximal contact contours. So if the optimal contact width and height, means the width, contact width, especially in back teeth, if the width of your contact is optimal, like this is the natural width in the natural tooth contact, what we need in our restoration. So this is the width that we need to check, and the height that we need to check by doing this. So this is the height. So in my front restoration, so this is the height of the contact, all right, and this is the width of the contact. So it should be optimal, means if it is too wide, like if all along, if in my back teeth I can say that my contacts are from this area to this, means these are wide contacts. Okay, and if the contact is just a point contact, means width is too, like just a 0.1 from this area to this area, then it's too like short contacts. So we have to check for that. These are the contours, how we check the contours of the contacts. And with the height, if my contacts are going like from top to the cervical area, covering the embrasure area as well, then the height is like more. So, and if there is just a point contact again, then it's like the height is less. So in my front tooth restoration, so you can see like there is a optimal contact height and width. So it comes under like optimal contact width and height, so it comes under very good. Or if the proximal contact slightly broad or slightly occlusally or gingivally placed, then it comes under satisfactory. Means if the contacts we can see from the top if they are too wide, and from the side if it's too, if my contact is over here or if it's over here, then it like too high or too low, then it comes under satisfactory. If it's just slightly high or low, it comes under satisfactory. But if it is too high or too low, or if the width is too broad, then it comes under borderline or unsatisfactory. And then we move to the next, morphologic tooth contours. So according to the morphology, if your restoration has optimal restoration of morphological tooth contours, means especially in the back teeth and overall morphology of the occlusal surface, if it follows the morphology of the tooth structures, then it in back teeth we will check that, and in the front teeth we will check the how the contours of your buccal and palatal contours are following your anatomy of the original anatomy of the tooth. So we will check for that. So if it is optimal restoration of morphological tooth contours, then it will come under very good. If the restoration morphology resembles original anatomy, means it's just the general resemblance but not the finely resembling to the original anatomy, it comes under satisfactory. If it is poorly defined morphology, it comes under borderline. And if there is an absence of tooth morphology and or excess depth of the occlusal contouring requiring replacement, then it comes under unsatisfactory. So for that, I will check that from the buccal side, it from all areas, all surfaces, it follows the tooth morphology, means it's from the incisal edges, it's same like bit round off and follows the tooth structure morphology, and from the proximal surface as well, so from the buccal, and from the palatal side again it follows the contours and all the fossas and the depth of the original tooth and the marginal ridge as well, so it follows the original tooth anatomy. And from the incisal as well, so it's the same thickness all along the tooth restoration, and so it all from all side it follows the original tooth anatomy, so it will come under optimal restoration of morphological tooth contours. But if it is generally resemble, then it will come under satisfactory. So for if we are checking your back teeth, so for premolars, it should follow all the contours and fossas, cusp and fossas position, and fine are fossas and where it lies. So we will check for that, like if fossa and for the molars as well. So we will check the original anatomy, like if all your cusp and fissures are according to the optimally follow the original tooth, then it comes under very good. But if it's just generally resemble, like you have all the cusp but not defined properly, then it will come under satisfactory. But if it is poorly defined morphology, then it comes under borderline. And if there is no cusp and not like all the absence of morphology, then it comes under unsatisfactory. Right now, so I will move to the next point, which is cusp or incisal edge height. So for that we will check. So in my restoration, it is almost the same as the adjacent tooths. So overall it's not high with the tooth structure, so it's following the same pattern, so it's the same height. So if it's going more toward if restoration height is more than tooth structure, like it's going like this or it's under the tooth structure, then it will come under borderline or unsatisfactory. But now it's because almost at the same level and following the contour, so it comes under optimal restoration of cusp or incisal edge height, so it comes under very good. But if it is like less or over less than 0.5 mm, then it comes under satisfactory. And if it is less or high more than 0.5 to 1 mm, then it's come under borderline. And if it is too high or too low, like more than 1 mm, then it comes under unsatisfactory. So same thing you will check for your premolars and molars. So in those we will check the cusp height. If it is more or less like 0.5 mm, then it will comes under satisfactory, and if it is more than 0.5 mm but less than 1 mm, borderline, and if the cusp height is higher or lower than 1 mm, then it comes under unsatisfactory. And the last point for the composite restoration is cusp, incisal edge or angle position, right? So if this angle, so in the front, in the anterior tooth, we will check for this angle, and for the posterior teeth we will check for the cusp angle position, means for this position. So if for the anterior teeth we will check for this angle, if it is going more towards like mesial or on the distal side, like if this angle is over here or over here, so we will check for this, then it will according to this restoration, it's almost like same. It's going at so it's like functional occlusal, and optimally incisal edge positioning means it's optimal, not going to more towards mesial or not going toward distal. So it's optimal. So for this we will go for very good. But if your incisal edge is in functional occlusal but anatomically is not at the right position, then it will go into satisfactory. But if it's incorrectly positioned but can be corrected by doing little bit finishing, then it will come under borderline. And if it is not, cannot be even corrected by the it cannot be corrected to the functional occlusion, then it will come under unsatisfactory, right? So for the posterior teeth we will check the cusp position. Like for premolar, if it's more towards distal or towards mesial, then it will do. If we can correct it, then it comes under borderline. But if we can't correct it, it will come under unsatisfactory. So this is the how we can do our assessment for our restoration, composite restoration, right? So I hope I cleared all your doubts, and that will help you with your assessment. So you can do now, it will help you to do your assessment at home. So yeah, we covered almost everything. So this is how ADC follow and do the assessment. So they follow all these rubrics.